you said like around 2007, 2008, you know, the reforms, like you were making really rapid reforms. And from Latvia and the Baltic states, you know, it's like young, energetic people were coming into offices, you know, it's like reading Georgia from the communist traditions, you know, it's like, and making great progress, almost like martial art in Estonia. 1994, whatever is like opposite to communism, like we will do it, like it doesn't matter what the international advisors are telling us, you know, the further we get in terms of tradition and institution, the better it is for us. And you mentioned at some point, you know, it's like you were making really rapid progress and the reforms stalled around 2007, 2008. Was it because like there was not a political will, or like the society was being complacent when it comes to civic participation and requirement for the reforms? Because European Union policy was, you become democracy, this is the path towards the European Union. And for the Baltic states, you know, European Union admission has been always second to the security interests, you know, it's like, but for NATO to assess if we are democracy or not, you know, it was always, if you are fit for EU membership, you are fit for NATO too. Was it like the lost like direction, you know, it's like from the European Union, the normative approach and passive approach towards Georgia that also affected those events, or stagnating, not, but like slower consolidation of public institutions, maybe neglect of information campaigns and ownership of the media by one oligarch? You know, it's like this is something we were observing, and we are making those mistakes too. You know, it's like during the democratic reforms, there is no correct path. There's only one path, and once you walk it, you know, sometimes you realize the opposite might have been better choice, but this is what we did before. And I don't think that Georgia should be, and the Georgian leadership should be, should blame and look for the any kind of mistakes that you made in the past. But when you look at the foreign policy and Europe and geopolitics, you know, how do you see how European and Western and American, Obama, for example, resetting relations with Russia, how did this affect, you know, the public mood and also the mood within the political elites in Georgia?
Well, it affected the general path in an existential way, simply because Georgia is not just a small country within a geopolitically fragile and vulnerable environment, but because Georgia is also a small country that lacks, let's say, fundamental natural resources to sustain independently, and also, let me put it bluntly, to allow itself to be a non-democratic state, like some countries in the neighborhood of the Caucasus. Georgia, in order for Georgia to survive in that environment, needs to be fundamentally democratic. It needs to have democratic institutions in order to attract Western investors, in order to secure their safe operational modalities on the ground, in order to ensure safe association process with the Western countries, because the West is what Georgia depends on fundamentally to have a secure developmental path in the future. Unlike, let's say, Azerbaijan, unlike some other countries that may have a luxury to not necessarily be a democracy, but still maintain its basic living standards, Georgia needs to be a democracy. And this is an understanding that was pretty clear to us from the very beginning. But again, going back to the past constellation of powers, we believed we came to power with, I don't know, almost 90% of popular support. We thought that's a mandate we have now to push through the reforms. We can, and we can do all the painful reforms without consulting the public or without explaining all the policies implemented in a proper way. This was one mistake that was clearly and effectively used by the propaganda machine that was working very effectively on the ground. And this type of information war enabled to mobilize the public, or part of the public, but that part that was very vocal, against the government. Now, having in the back hat that you need to keep somewhat democratic flaw within your country, also to keep in touch with the international community in the way you need their support, the government decided to slow down, but also it started compromising. It started compromising with those who were then, as we found out, backed by Russia and were using this, let's say, saw it as a weakness of the government to then push even farther. And it culminated in 2007 in a very clearly Russian-backed, Russian-financed attempt to overthrow the government, which then resulted in resignation of Saakashvili and re-election in 2008, which enabled the government to receive a new mandate. But obviously, Russia wasn't sleeping then, and it was time when Russia realized that, well, at least it was then when Russia realized, as we understand now, that it needs to take stronger steps against Georgia. And we were earlier today listening to President Metsola when she said, we failed to listen to our Baltic partners, also to our Ukrainian partners, and I may have the freedom to say that Georgians were even earlier very vocal, including myself, warning the West that keeping this engagement policy of Russia doesn't get Europe any further. On the contrary, and absolutely. When you are referring to the Western policies, obviously the West demanded more democracy in Georgia. That's clear, understandable, and justified. However, it failed to understand the role of Russia in the region. It failed to clearly listen to what Putin said at the Munich Security Conference in 2007, when he clearly disclosed all his plans towards the region. He was very clear on warning the West not to go any further beyond the borders allowed by Moscow. And yet, Europe seemed pretty unprepared in 2008 when the Russian aggression started. They were, both the US and Europe, they were in as much, or they lacked the preparation in as much as they started to look for a scapegoat, looking for ways of how to blame or whom to blame, rather than to see the reality.
That's true.
And then,
we were actually watching in disbelief first, like in the Baltic states, right? Even us, were too idealistic at some point and a little bit deaf, to see the change coming so quickly. And then, especially the French and German leadership, trying to make phone calls or personal visits to Putin and trying to talk to Putin in 2008, 2014, Sarkozy, Hollande, and now Macron, is like doing the same stuff, I can call and talk.
Absolutely.
It will not change anything. And I think that those were the moments when European Union really missed, to bring the allies in from South Caucasus. At some point also Azerbaijan when it comes to legal matters and observation of the human rights in prisons or somewhere else. Azerbaijan has been a bit different. It's like with the luxury to dwell on fossil fuel reserves, but also it had also closer relationship to Georgia, and it has been like a pragmatic partner, I would say. But now if we scroll the tape forward and we are where we are, you said there was a gap, between the government and the public with the reforms and communication. It seems like there is like distance from the moon to the earth now, currently, between the political cohort that Georgian democratic structures opened the door to communicate, now has pushed democracy out of Georgia, and all the Western society, political, civil organizations, media, anyone who criticizes Bidzina Ivanishvili is a foreign agent, even if you are Georgian. Mm-hmm. So you are a local person interested in having welfare, stability, non-Russian controlled puppet government, and something that would allow for the Georgian public, to build its own future. What would be your policy recommendation now, for example, for the European Union, difficulties with the transatlantic bonds with Trump and the United States, even for Europeans, are there to stay for next years, I would say, until midterm election or the next 4 years? And to what extent Trumpism will remain is still a question mark. But Europe, Georgia, what is that we could do to promote positive reforms and support a society that is on daily or every evening on streets protesting against the government and suffering from this oppression? What would you recommend Metsola, European Commission, or particular European major states or smaller states to do?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. It was a miscalculated geopolitical approach. Mm-hmm. It would be responsible to say that the Western players did allow Ivanishvili to happen in Georgia. Mm-hmm. Because again, Western alliances or international support in wherever domestic policy, domestic happenings were taking place, the public did look at how the international community reacts, and the international community felt, fatigue or dissatisfied with the previous government. It was time for a change, and maybe it was time for a change, but what was coming was in the face of Ivanishvili or his coalition. It was pretty clear to many, and it should have been very clear to the international community that it was from the very beginning a Russian asset who was designated to come to Georgia and to divert Georgia from its European path. Mm-hmm. It never meant to be he never meant to be a democratic player. Russian-backed Russian oligarch was never intended to be a democratic player that keeps moving Georgia towards the West, but rather on the contrary. And this is what is happening now, and where we are today, after 13 years of Russian oligarch ruling pretty much, independently, let's say, without any
opposition.
Yeah, any formal position, but also, let's say, without any support of any kind of democratic institutions ruling the country. His system of ruling is entirely anti-democratic. He keeps his close circle or allies. He governs as a criminal syndicate that is based solely on corruption, on blackmail, on Russian support, in order to maintain the power, to avoid the accountability, and to stay in power endlessly, which is in turn a safe haven for Russia. An autocratic Georgia with compromised leadership is something that Russia could not achieve through tanks in 2008.
Absolutely.
And has now all the means to have the means of governance over the corridor, to keep the strategic corridor under control, but also to keep Georgia as a bargaining chip against the West, given the geopolitical dynamics and the shifting dynamics in Georgia that Azerbaijan and Armenia managing to free themselves from Russian influence. So obviously for Moscow is key now to maintain control over Georgia in order to maintain its stance in the region and keep the West out of the region. And this is what Ivanishvili is exactly delivering. He is obviously not just working in or acting in Russian interests, but he is a prolongation of the Russian de facto occupation of Georgia.
I don't think he even hides it.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
His consolidation of power has been really blunt, very rapid. Sometimes with jealousy, I would expect the European Union to act in a similar way to balance the influences and to be really a geopolitical strategic player.
Yeah.
And I can see that, you know, there has been a rapid change in Georgia, like the consolidation, the warnings of the former president about things to come in Georgia, and she has tried, you know, to be a balancing power. But if the former president was like already eloquently telling to the Western allies that something is coming in Georgia, we were deaf and we didn't hear those signs. But now, looking at what's happening in Georgia, and the public is still looking for reforms and democratic path. You can see them on the streets wearing European Union flags, standing against the security apparatus. Do you think there could be a change similar to the one in 2003 and 2004? Or what could be the triggers and what?
No, I don't. I don't. And I'm not being pessimistic, but I'm being realistic. And I don't see any reason in, you know, feeding illusions that change might be achieved anytime soon. This is not going to happen due to two main reasons. Firstly, because the power imbalance is very obvious in Georgia. On the one hand, you have two competing forces. And on the one hand, you have a fully consolidated power that was taking place for 13 years, and 13 years is a lot of time to consolidate power in a small country. Oligarch Ivanishvili controls all key and essential state institutions essential to democratic change. The parliament, the government, the law enforcement agencies, the judiciary, the municipalities, even the national bank is under informal control. The key financial institutions, Central Election Commission. So there is no chance you can challenge that force and change the status quo through elections, because they possess all the means to stage elections in a way and to stage the outcome wherever they wish to have. Now, on the other hand, they also possess all the coercive means to literally fight any kind of democratic upheaval. At the same time, you have on the other side the competing force, the democratic forces, completely barehanded. They have nothing other than public power. Now, a public power in a conventional way, like people in the streets demanding change, matter in a democracy. For a dictatorship, it doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter how many people go into the streets and how few people turn out to vote. They simply do not care. Now, given this imbalance of power, there is very little people can do domestically. There is literally nothing they can do other than continue protesting. But also, given the surrounding circumstances, as you said, Ivanishvili is now having consolidated all the institutional power. He's now going after the remaining democratic institutions, such as the civil society, such as the independent media. There are very few outlets left that still maintain to function independently. Political parties that are now under threat, those political parties who refuse to cooperate with the government or give them any kind of legitimization, they are threatened to get outlawed and banned. And the international and the independent universities are targeted, who are now labeled as a producing force of the youth that is that dares to demonstrate outside and keep critical voices. So basically, they will now silence and shut down and eliminate all the remaining critical voices now in Georgia to have a fully consolidated power now, and to have Georgia ready to deliver to get delivered to Russian influence and keep Russia's stance in Georgia for the time being. Now, what's the way out?
If any, I mean, sounds
firstly,
like a predicament.
If I was to recommend to our international partners, and this is obviously what we are doing, advocating is what's left, and what we can do is, in the short term, we need to rebalance power, meaning obviously supporting the internal democratic forces, but also consistently weakening the regime from outside, not just through travel bans, not just through visa restrictions, but to really targeted individual sanctions, targeting not just the system players, but also the enablers. Also probably targeting those financial institutions that support the system and keep them running. In a parallel way, where the entire Europe, in a joint effort with the United States, tries to weaken Russia, because without major geopolitical changes in the region, there is little room for any change in the Caucasus region, obviously. In the medium run, and a general once told us that a soldier's duty is sometimes to survive. In the medium run, we expect the international community to help us, the civic players, survive, basically to survive in order to be ready to jump in and prepare the grounds whenever the next window of opportunity arises. Whenever the geopolitical circumstances change to the better, and when there is again room in Georgia,
such as for example, change inside of Russia, that would also imply any and to be ready for this moment.
Absolutely.
So basically, the events that could unfold with the victory of Ukraine could actually affect the democratic processes in Georgia too, correct?
Success of Georgia completely depends on the success of Ukraine, and I mean success of Ukraine in a very broader sense, not just winning the war and then start negotiating on how to divide Ukraine and how to keep Russia empowered. But it does not necessarily mean that success of Ukraine also automatically would translate into success of Georgia or of the region, unless Russia loses that power, that whatever strength it still maintains to control the region or to leverage the West. Russia needs to lose its capabilities of, but also to, it needs to be pushed into changing this this mindset of maintaining control over its what it's called its backyard or sphere of influence or wherever. The mindset of this Cold War thinking and the post-war regional division needs to be completely dismantled in order for the sovereign states to maintain their capabilities to choose whatever way they want to choose and move to whatever directions they want to go. And for Georgia, it's pretty clear. Georgian society has decided it is a European country. It wants towards Europe. It wants to be a part. It wants to be part of the civilized Western world. Now, what we need is
the change inside of Russia. For
the change
first.
Inside of Russia, but also until then, a real clear-cut change within the European Union and the Western and American players to understand that Georgia is not just a country somewhere in the Caucasus, but that it's key to European and Western security, and to understand all the mistakes that have been done after 2008 with the reset you mentioned, and with ignoring 2008 and with ignoring the Crimean annexation and with ignoring players like Ivanishvili.
We shouldn't ignore the mistakes that we have done in the yesteryears, definitely, and probably we have to look also for the strategic moment, as you suggested, change inside of Russia, which is instrumental to the aggression Russia has launched since 2007. We have to look for the opening, and Europe has to be ready as an actor, not as bureaucracy, to really do something about this, to make sure that, you know, Russian kleptocracy, on which the power dwells also inside of Georgia, changes. I'm really hopeful such change comes very soon. More than being tired of Russia's aggression, I very much hope the Russian society and international community gets tired from Putin and his regime and his foreign security policy that is dwelling on military power. And I very much hope this change is coming soon and we can shift back to welfare. With this, I would like to conclude the session at the Riga Security Forum 2025. I hope next year or even this year, you know, you can use the opportunity to move back to Georgia and assume the official duties, you know, is like continuing to reform the country. I had the pleasure to speak with Nino Kalandadze, former Vice Foreign Minister in Georgia, member of the parliament, and now active civilian activist, keeping up the historical memory and the possibility for positive reforms in Georgia in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your interest, for keeping Georgia in focus, and for your attention.
We will be watching.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.